NANI?!
Hello friend. Start of July, a teaser was given of upcoming 2-army set for the upcoming 3rd edition of Bolt Action. From the field cap, even blacked out, it was obvious an Axis member holding a Sten. From the baggy nature of the uniform, there was a chance for plastic mountain troops. I'm sure others may have wanted something involving Russians too. Well, it turns out, not only was it German, but a Winter German paratrooper for the Battle of the Bulge set. Not only is it a new German kit, but a new Winter Americans too. Looking up close, the paint schemes are simple but flow well. Germans have a mix of cool white and a tanner off-white, which may have started as a single white base coat washed with a sepia to break up the details, mixed with bits of Air Force blue, others with splitter camo, some even quilted pants. These are troops I would recommend using wash paints on. White is a color I don't play games with. Priming them perhaps a white gray or a off-white, then a light gray wash would be best, as the modern Warlord plastics are well detailed to hold wash. They definitely have the veteran thing going on with a high variety of weapons with captures like the Sten, the PPSH, shows the late war desperation for anything that shoots. They are a smaller force with high amount of offensive build opposed to the Americans. The American force seems a little bigger. We have full squads with 2 bars and a vehicle. Greyhound decked out in DACA. Sort of getting a Band of Brothers box set level of balance here, but we'll come back to that in a sec. I was not expecting Winter Americans. The only way to get them before was a mono metal kit, so finally getting the nice modern plastics is a plus. They also have a BAR and a firing position that both the US infantry and Rangers lack. And the Marines sort of have one in a firing position, but it's a bit fiddly to get that way as it's a holdover from their older plastic design. And these are going to be easy to paint too. The Winter Germans are perhaps Warlord's best plastic kit at the moment. Prime them field gray, pick out the webbing, and wash for easy battle ready. This kit seems to follow that method of ease. Now let's go back to the balance of this set. It seems off at first glance. The 2-army sets outside of a gentleman's war don't fit the simple definition of balanced, which is I get a circle, you get a circle, I get a cube, you get a cube. However, this is a war game with factions, each with strengths, weaknesses that may not be apparent at first glance. The Germans are going to be taken as vet with heavy assault presence. They want to get in close quarter to let that mix of automatics do their work. The Americans are focusing rifle heavy with support armored car to pick them off at range. The German paratroopers also have a stubborn rule that ignores pin markers on morale test. That Greyhound is also open top, leaving it open to pins. Speaking of the Greyhound, the stat card looks to have changed. 2nd edition stats has MMG at 36 inch 5 shots, HMG at 36 3 shots. Now the MMG has 6 shots, HMG increased range to 48, 6 shots, still retaining its +1 penetration. That's a bit of an upgrade to the HMG and makes the Greyhound way more of a threat the Germans can't ignore. Even if the table has plenty of cover, on advance that HMG is going to put in work. Since we can only speculate the set's balance based on 2nd edition rules, the stat card shows there are plenty of unexpected changes coming. At worst, the set is still a very thematic demo game to pique people's interest. I did put the points into Easy Army for fun. I noticed it updated new bits of the info for the new formation released. And it's just that, as no points have been released, so it's not particularly useful at the moment. Under the 2nd edition points, I came out clearly in favor of the Americans by a weapons team worth of points. I did my best to add their equip as modeled, so we have 2 options to tweak the Germans and bring a Mortar and make that Greyhound work for its meal, or take a Gewehr 43 sniper from the Tough Gut supplements that lets them move and shoot without penalty. There are many other weapons options to fill the gaps, though it would be best to play a few rounds as is to get a feel, then adjust to personal taste. Looking at the pre-orders, rulebook looking dummy thick, pre-order for a signed copy of this edition's author, plus a unique figure of Francis Curry. Warlord does some really nice limited figures. Looks like he has a rifle grenade mounted in a pouch of bazooka rockets. If you know how he won the Medal of Honor, that last detail was very telling. Most of the pre-orders are just a mix of rules, the 2-army set and the 30-man box of the new troops. One stood out, the company-sized dealings. This stood out as Bolt Action is normally a single platoon. if we could do a bit of speculation, perhaps the new rules may have scenarios for larger company-sized fights. Yet again, a bit of mostly baseless speculation, but that offer generally would be more guys than one would ever need for current play. I noticed there's not a traditional one army starter box yet. I'm rather curious what they will stick in each one when they do appear. And as I was slowly writing this up over the weeks, the details were leaked on the new army formation. Traditionally, Bolt Action is a platoon-based game. Looks like that's sort of still true, but as I speculated with the company deal, it looks like we'll have full artillery, tank, and rifle sections. I feel like the option to play larger games at a quasi-company level will be an option. The one thing that made my eyebrow raise was the infantry squads. There are no engineer designations. It was a popular way to set up your force to add 2 rifle sections, then an assault engineer, and roll a dice, perhaps with an added flamethrower. Now, engineers are their own section. Feels like they're trying to go a bit more historical in the formations, though there isn't anything too historical about these formations. Pay attention to the darker outlines on the pages here. That is telling the bare minimum needed. The standard rifles just need 1 officer, 2 squads. Same for most of the others, with the exception of the tank and motorized being 1 command, 1 unit. Heavy weapons emphasize mix and match, but they don't place the same emphasis on the field artillery. I'm assuming it'll be the same, with hints of more types to come. There are some changes I know people like. It looks like the heavy weapon teams, specifically machine gun teams, won't get one shot by snipers. Also, small team rules seem to be cut, so no reason not to run officers with 2 men. Medium mortar meta altered. For the base platoon is only light mortars outside of taking a heavy weapons platoon. Vehicle-mounted machine guns get 3 shots instead of the stated 6. So that means the Greyhound card is wrong, because despite saying 6 shots, it is coaxial, and the pintle-mounted MG gets full shots to air with a flak rule. It's weird that they printed the card to say 6 when the Greyhound is a vehicle, and they state all vehicle MGs are halved. The army building really feels like 40k Imperial Guard list building. We can have heavy weapon platoons, artillery platoons, entire tank platoons. We will need more officers for those individual platoons. One thing to note is the other platoons amounts cannot exceed the amount of the base rifle platoon. You can have a mash of all others, but if you want, for example, 2 tank platoons, you will then need 2 rifle platoons. That would make a rather impressive Battle of Kursk, which makes me very curious about point cost. Tanks were rather expensive in 2nd edition, which favored light tanks and armored car usage. We also see transport options. If we fully transport an entire platoon with all its options, that's a lot of trucks. We are approaching 28mm Flames of War, 7th edition 40k. If you know, you know. Thankfully, it's not mandatory outside of the motorized section. This really feels like the reinforced platoon just with extra steps, a Frankenstein of it with an absurd amount of officers on the table. If point costs are similar, then we have an officer tax that prevents a take-all-comers army. For example, if you want a rifle and a tank section, but due to the officer tax, you only have points left over for either a heavy weapon or field artillery, not both, and perhaps neither, depending on how many vehicles were taken. The reinforced platoon was a very simple, easy to play as is. Get a little bit of everything, and it did become quite streamlined by the end of the edition. The one army starter sets were designed around it, to be played out of the box. Now you'll need an extra sprue or 2 for all the officers, perhaps more vehicles. Those little bits are expanded into potentially complete platoons, expanding the size and cost of the game. One of the reasons Bolt Action blew up in the past few years was people moving on from the mess and expense of 40k. These changes, as I see them, so far, do not seem anywhere more or less as a new player friendly as they claimed. So I'm very conflicted here. The point costs are the missing element that will wrap up this Scooby-Doo mystery. This is what I talked about in my previous video of older editions being perfectly playable. Second edition might be around a little longer for segments of the player base, so we'll have to see.